My mic's working, yes. Hey everyone. Super excited to be here at Zebu Live 2023 and to host this panel on how Web3 gaming can go mass market. I'm Mel from Blockchain Game Alliance and really looking forward to this panel discussion. Thanks guys for being here. Maybe you would like to give a quick intro about who you are and what you do.
Sounds good. Thanks so much. So hi everyone, I'm Jeremy. I'm head of gaming at TriliTech and responsible for the success of gaming in the Tezos ecosystem. So before this, I spent around 7 years working in games, including on games like League of Legends and Garena Free Fire.
Hey everyone, I'm Jon, the co-founder of Playember. It's really great to be here. Playember, we're creating a like Web3 playground for Gen Z, so like gaming, non-gaming, gamification. I started off in ad tech on the dark side, all the stuff that we don't want games developers to really know about what's happening. I built one of the earliest ad networks that me and my friends sold to a US software company. I ran Ad Colony in Europe, like Video SDK. I had a good 2 years in Paris at Oma Games in the early days of hyper casual when that blew up, and then was running Boombit's free-to-play publishing division before I started Playember. So I've sort of been through that journey of the evolution of free-to-play games, and I'm just super excited about blockchain tech and what it can do for gaming.
Hey guys, Francis, I'm head of economy at Shrapnel. We're a AAA first-person shooter that's trying to bring like UGC as the core element to the game so players can create content. In terms of background, don't have like a gaming one like these folks. Came from the aerospace industry, so a lot of modeling and simulation. Kind of doing AI integrations into drone tech. So.
Awesome, thank you. So just to give some context to the conversation, a lot of the early Web3 games were more focused on crypto natives, GameFi with an emphasis on earning and NFTs. Now we're seeing a shift to mobile gaming and more focus on making exciting and fun games. One of the major challenges has been user acquisition and player growth. And tapping into traditional gamers. So, you know, unlike free-to-play games where hyper-casual games constantly bring in new players into the ecosystem, what is the entry point for Web3 games and how can we truly onboard mainstream users into Web3? So let's kick off with the first question. How can mainstream users, who are mainstream users and how are they different from Web3 and play-to-earn gamers?
So yeah, I think for me, mainstream players are a bit of a broad catch-all. League of Legends player is a mainstream player. Candy Crush player is also a mainstream player. So I think it really helps to really focus down on exactly what your target audience is. There's a really good article by someone called Sergey Galvokin. He used to direct publishing at Epic Games and also created Steam Spy, which is was the best data analytics platform for Steam. And his point was that your target audience doesn't exist. And the key here is that you really need to focus really down into the weeds around like who your audience is. Maybe they are a person in the Philippines who's like age 20 to 30, who plays casual games on their way home from work. Or maybe there's someone in America who plays Call of Duty with their friends on the weekends. So you need to really like segment to a very high level in order to really understand your users. And once you understand like what they want out of your game, you're able then to serve them exactly what the blockchain benefits are. For example, if you know the players love to engage in a blockchain economy, then being able to offer trading to these players would add a lot of value. Conversely, if they're more for, let's say, the interoperability play, then having a lot of mini games that they can jump in and out of in a very seamless way would be more important.
Yeah, I think for me, nothing's changed. It just comes down to player motivations. It's just with blockchain, there's this tricky element that, in Web3 gaming, we live in this bubble where the default is blockchain means you have to earn from the game, right? So you've got, for me, that's GameFi. That's like gamified finance. It's not actually making a game as I know it in free to play, an actual game that is fun to play. So I think, well, where are these users going to come from? They're in the app stores, right? And I think we get caught up in the idealism of Web3, right? And what I mean by that is for, let's say, mass market Gen ZR players, they just want to play a fun game. They don't care if it's built on Unity or not. They're not reading headlines about Unity. They don't care if it's built on, AVAX or Tezos or Near. They literally couldn't give a shit. That all they really care about is this game really fun? Are my friends playing this game? And then this concept of earning has been around in Web 2 for years. You can pick up, download games from the app stores now and play real money games. You can get gift cards, right? None of it's got Web 3 in it at all. So I think there's this big misconception that has been fueled by this sort of like Web 3 gaming bubble, that like Web 3 gaming is going to save gaming. And at the moment, like that's why we started, because I think for mass market gamers, no one actually thought about what they want from a game and if the answer provided by blockchain technology is going to be better than what they already have. So I think that's what needs to be solved at the moment. And I would look at the Navic slide, those guys do great content, but in the Navic slide, if you are building a Web3 game and there is a token and there are NFTs in it and you're creating this expectation where people now need to earn, then yeah, you've got these tricky audiences to balance against the free-to-play audiences that have a very different expectation of the outcome of the game than a free-to-play audience.
Yeah, I think building on what you said, like everyone, these experiences already exist, and like all blockchain tech does is give a slightly simpler way for them to interact with it. And I think, from our perspective, what we do is we just present a regular Web 2 game for them. So they have a free-to-play first-person shooter that they can use. But there's like extra experiences on top that they might want to interact with. And if we notice that players are going to, like, the open market, trading, minting content, creating value in the ecosystem to extract value out, then we'll kind of focus more on those unique experiences. But if people don't care, they don't care. They don't want to digest that content. And as you said, that's not the type of player that's come to play our game. That's not the audience that we've attracted. So it'd be kind of silly to focus on those folks. Like if they're not the people coming into play, like we're not gonna do that. But there's like as you said, a few 100,000 people that are currently in that hypothesis that think that's the case. And you don't know until someone's tried.
So what do you think some of the key challenges are for Web3 games to onboard mainstream users?
I mean, I think for us, the main thing is anytime we do any kind of advertising, it's super expensive to acquire a player, just because the natural narrative for Web3 gaming is that it's a sham, like people have been scammed, like it's all play to earn. And I think that does come down to some cultural standpoints, but like from at least the markets we're targeting, it is mainly legitimacy and proving that you have a game and a product that people want to play. I think the other side of that, though, is gamers are inherently negative people. Like, no matter how good the product is, they will just shit on it. They will tell you it's terrible. They will tell you it's not good. Like, look at Call of Duty. It's the prime example. They make billions of dollars every year, so clearly people are paying for it. Clearly it's an experience that people want to pay to get into as a $60 game. Yet you never see anybody say anything good about that game. Like, it is just, I think the market we're in terms of the industry, not Web3, but gaming, you won't hear positive news about something. Even like Elden Ring was 50-50, and that was like game of the year. So I think the main barrier is just having people talk less shit about it to the point where they actually might want to try the game out.
So I think one of the biggest challenges at the moment are the app stores, right? Now for me, the app stores are great. They're just a huge window to distribution, and I don't think we should discredit that just because they do take 30%. I think the biggest problem is a UX design problem at the moment. So I think the best example recently is probably Mythical Games with their NFL game. But from a UX player perspective, it sucks, and it's not their fault. It's just Apple will not allow you to trade in-game on-chain. So for those of you who don't know, if I summarize the process, it's I'm playing the game, I get 3 cards that I can buy that are NFTs, but I can't technically buy them in the game. I'm kind of saving them in my basket, and then I have a 5-minute window to check out. I then have to go in-game, make an in-app purchase, buy some gems to then buy the NFT. But if I want to sell it, I then have to click out to a marketplace. So imagine if Apple, obviously there's a lot of ifs here, the regulation was all very clear, but if Apple just enabled this all possible through Apple Pay, then this industry is going to move like 5,000 times faster. Now, Google have been a bit more open about what they will allow in-game, in-app. But I think that is a major problem at the moment. As someone that designs games, it kind of sucks for players that they want to play this app on their phone, and we're forcing them to click out and do this stuff outside of the app. So I think for me, for mass adoption, that's ideally where we need to go to, which is why in this sort of first wave of blockchain gaming, most people are building browser-based experiences outside the App Store because it's far easier to design because, for me, there's just amazing tech in Web3, right? I'm not going to say we don't need more tech, but there's a lot of great tech for you as a developer to build on. You've just got way less design challenges and blockers building outside of the App Store.
Got it. I think from my perspective as well, like some things that game developers can do to really kind of make it more clear to players what the value proposition is to focus narrowly on exactly what your player wants and then articulate it to them in one sentence, right? So perhaps play my game because you'll be able to trade the item after you leveled up with your friends. Play my game because you can take this item and perhaps use it in the few other experiences that are within our ecosystem, right? So once you're able to kind of point towards the value in a very concrete way without all the technical jargon, then players will be a bit more interested in this. And then I think the second piece of the puzzle is also reducing the friction. I think the platform issue is massive. Like, mobile is more than half of the gaming market today. So, not being able to launch properly on mobile is a huge barrier. But the other barrier is also on the wallets and just account creation. So I think there are maybe two parts here. One on the technical side, how can we, at least in the beginning of the customer journey, really abstract more and more of this away from the user and slowly introduce it to the players over time. And then also on the communication side, instead of calling wallets, which are inherently very financial, can we just call it like player accounts, where you store all your assets across different games?
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question about some of the solutions that you guys can see. And I know onboarding and the friction is quite a big issue. What can games do about that, or where do you see the tech advancing in that respect to be able to facilitate that process for users?
So I think in terms of the way to try and think about it is, like Jeremy's saying, is the way you get stuck is if you think about creating a wallet. Like, gamers know how to create accounts, you know how to create an Apple ID, you know how to log into Google. So for me, that bit is intuitive. The way we look at the challenge is what we're trying to do is create a free-to-play ad-based player to an in-app purchase player, right? And this is where you don't have to reinvent the rule book, because depending on your genre in mobile games, you kind of know how to do that. So effectively, what you're trying to get someone to do is create an account. All right, hide the tech part, but you shouldn't be lying to them about what they're creating an account for. I think that's when you're going to get in dangerous territory. But effectively, it's a value exchange. You want someone to create an account that effectively starts their blockchain experience. So you need to figure out a gamified way of doing that that gives them something that they attach value to within that specific game that they are playing. So again, we've been using live ops for years in games where you're targeting players based on in-game behavior, in-game revenue behavior, and you're triggering tailored offers to them that make their game more fun. So I would suggest looking at that area as a way, if you want to get gamers to create accounts, look at your, games in your genre that have got, high IAP revenue, and figure out how they're getting those gamers to make in-app purchases, because that's the behavior you want. You want gamers in your game that already have the behavior of putting money in. Right? Because if they're used to putting money in, then you're halfway there. You're just building on an existing behavior, and you're then to simplify it, swapping out, paying in fiat for some sort of like crypto token. You just then need to figure out the tech on the back end. So I think that's a really good place to start to figure out how to get gamers to create accounts. Just look at existing like FTUE and UX in games.
Yeah, I think the key point is, there's no reason for this to feel like any other experience. Like, it is just a new type of tech. Like, blockchain is just a database system that is structured in a slightly separate way to what is typically used right now in games. Like, there's no reason to treat it otherwise. Yes, you have other applications that you can use it for. Yes, there are kind of additional use case pieces, but like, it is just a storage layer. Like, we are using it as a storage layer, and there are rules that are attached to that and things that we get from it. So like, for us, there's no reason, unless a player shows those types of behaviors that you're talking about, that we're closely monitoring, that they want to know that this is that experience. If they don't want to know, like, we don't think they have to be told, because effectively we're just trying to give them some level of a dopamine hit from playing the game, from enjoying the experience that they're having with us. So like for us, I think we take the opposite route of like, hey, we don't actually have to educate you on what this is. Like, it is a game, you've enjoyed playing it, cool. If you get to that point where you have like $50, $60 in your account, and then that's when the crypto use case of like, hey, you can cash out this, as opposed to having to go through gift cards, you can go direct to fiat. That's the point when we might turn around and say, hey, like, this is the experience that you're in, like that you were unaware of before. These are the benefits that you get from it. You know, go interact with it if you want. If you don't, fine, keep playing the experience you've enjoyed. So I think for us, it comes from just completely stripping away anything to do with Web3 about the game. Because I don't think gamers care. They want to play a game. Like, you see it in Steam as well. Like, people are trading thousands of dollars worth of skins. Like, they don't care that someone else owns the IP there. They truly don't care. They just want to play your game. Like, so don't tell them.
So I think to echo that as well, I think it's really around the player journey. So as Jon mentioned, the first time user experience, so how are players being onboarded, and then as they move along their journey, they accumulate, they spend more within the game, and then now they realize that what they've accumulated over time is worth something, or maybe they have something inside they don't really value, but they want something else that they can trade for instead of buy directly. Right? So I think there are all these different entry points with which it suddenly makes sense for them to learn a bit more. But at least for the first, few weeks, and when they're first starting to play the game, it should really all be about enjoying it, abstracting the blockchain and the friction away as far as possible. And then when you're introducing the new value use cases, and then you can add in a bit of friction, because once players love the game, they would do anything to keep playing it and keep enjoying it to the max.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask about education, or whether you think that putting the tech under the hood is the way to go. So when you are educating people along that journey, how do you see that? What does that look like as a user journey, and how do you communicate with your gamers?
So I think what we typically do with our partners in the ecosystem is we sit down together with them, and then we work with some of the actual players that are playing the prototypes that they've built, and then we see where exactly the players are starting to feel confused or starting to churn, right? And this is a very common thing in the Web2 traditional gaming industry as well, where you're really kind of analyzing exactly which part of the funnel players are getting difficulty with, or are not liking it. Maybe the quest is too difficult, they get bored from grinding 20 mobs. So we kind of apply that same funnel analysis to the partners within our ecosystem, work with them to figure out where exactly the friction comes from. And then once we identify that, then we know exactly also how to reduce that friction at that specific point, but then also kind of where later on it might make sense to kind of A/B test and reintroduce that friction when the value becomes more apparent.
So I think the approach that we're taking is not necessarily like the sort of Web3 mentality, like earn and learn, is our view is we shouldn't have to teach them anything. It should just be intuitive based on behaviors they already have in games. So I'll give you an example. So obviously, I mean, I'm terrible at like trading NFTs, but I do love NFTs. But I think for our audience, we don't need to throw up NFTs in our games. So what we need to prove is, will they spend an off-chain in-game currency on effectively a Unity asset, right? Will they show us that behavior is there? And will they go a step further and spend a large percentage of this, in-game off-chain token then on cosmetic items? Because, unlike shooters, where for me that makes sense for NFTs, because people, behavior's there, they love like the gun or the weapon they've got, or in RPG games. If you look at more casual games, if you take like Candy Crush, I mean, obviously their IP is beautiful, but people don't care about the IP in that game, right? They just want boosters, right? You don't have to make everything an NFT. So for our audience, where typically in our games they're not really IP driven, it makes sense at first to see if users just like IP and will spend a made up currency on it. And if they are, it's then far easier to then see that they're attaching value to that. They spent a lot of time customizing their character. So then to ask them the question about the concept of, hey, would you now like to trade this? Feels a lot more natural than just going straight in with this real abrupt, hey, create an account, you can own this NFT, start teaching them about a wallet, because they're going to ask you why. So it's much easier to come at it from that sort of Web2, 2.5, 3 approach for our audience anyway, because that's the sort of behavior that they're showing us.
Yeah, I think like, you want them to be retained in your ecosystem before you start presenting them with new things, because like then you know they're here to stay. And I think any form of education that takes them out of the core retention loop that you're trying to present to them is like a poor presentation of that like education, because like you've got them in the system that's trying to lock them in, and then you're suddenly like dangling something in front of them to move them out of that loop. It's just not it's not a good, I mean, it might be a good user experience, but it might not be a good business choice from a retention aspect. So I think for us, the main way we do that education is when it is a piece that they've not seen in terms of behavior that they can do in a normal game. So for example, cashing out the value that they've gained from collecting loot within the game, or whether it's like actually creating content and then owning the IP behind it. Like, we'll explain why, but like it's not going to take them out of the experience unless they truly want to learn why. I think for us, it is all about keeping them in that loop, and we'll tell them the new things that they can do, but like we're not going to tell them why they can do it unless they really want to know. And that's going to be like, you know, literally clicking out and getting some T's and C's and that type of thing. But like, as I said in my previous answer, like we don't think they should know it's on chain, like unless they really want to know. So I don't think you have to educate them on what the tech is, just like what your platform or what your game can do with that tech. That's all they really want to know about. Anything that you do beyond that, you're kind of taking them out of the experience, which could eventually take them out of the game, and you don't want that to happen.
Cool, thank you. So what genres of games and types of blockchain integration could unlock mass onboarding in Web3?
Yeah, I think anything with clear, like as Jon said, IP towards it, like that is the main thing of value right now. Like we've seen it with Parallel as a TCG, like anything where people can attach themselves to the value of something. So anything that has IP value, whether it's like a Marvel game or something of that nature, if there's that like resident thing that people want to trade between themselves because it is a collectible and they want to purchase it. So that's common behaviors we've seen in the real world. Or even an RPG, because that's another thing that people attach emotional value to the items in. And I think those are the, like IP isn't really a genre, but it applies to any genre, but it's like if you don't have that, why are there NFTs in the game to trade? Unless there is an emotional attachment to the pieces, which comes from usually an RPG style game where you're sat there, you're like, I have grinded for tens of hours to try and get this item and I need it for my character, so I'll buy it off someone else. So I think those are the two pieces. So one is a specific genre, one is a nature of the assets that you'd be purchasing.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to what, you know, we're all businesses that are raising VC money, so it depends on really what you're trying to achieve. So like one example, like for me in the context of Web3, if you look at what Axie and Jiho and the team are doing, you know, you could argue that is mass onboarding. They've just created a category and audience that simply didn't exist. They've got players that now love the cute little Axie IP. They're now onboarding, you know, and winning games over from other blockchains to build on Ronin. I think what they're doing is fascinating. For me, again, we use this phrase still early, but they're demonstrating everything to me that shows that that could be the future of mass onboarding in Web3 games. Versus then if you look at sort of other categories and we look at like free-to-play games, you've already got an audience there. And the approach we're all talking about, well, I think if you get this approach right, that's when you can see this mass onboarding of these Web2 casual gamers into Web3. The challenge is then how to close the gap and move them from this very light Web3 experience to become, you know, a player for like Francis and the team at Shrapnel, right? Because it's the same in free-to-play games. It's like you don't go from a hyper-casual game to an auto-battler. That's a huge jump. The same in Web3, we have to just reset our expectations where, okay, you've got that game genre introduction to navigate first, and then depending on how it's done, we've now got that extra layer of, you know, learning, teaching that we're talking about as well, with potentially some new tech as well. So you've kind of got that double barrier to work through. So I think that's the one thing that I love about Web3 gaming is everyone is talking to each other behind the scenes because we've got a common goal and trying to figure out how we do build this ecosystem where we truly are able to move players around between games, just like we have the mechanics for that in Web2 games, right? And it's just very established in terms of how we do cross-promotion and the ad network model and mediation model. It's all very well established, you know, despite some rocky times in terms of, yeah, privacy changes and you know, the sort of economic world we're in. And I think that's also a key thing that we're all trying to build out behind the scenes, as well as building our own games. How do we create this funnel for players to neatly move them into the ecosystem and then around different games?
So I think there are like three broad categories. They're like more of the high cost, high quality AAA genre that's quite competitive, like Shrapnel. Then there are more of the blue ocean genres, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And then there are more of the Web3 native games, you know, the innovative ones like Wolf Game, Dark Forest, and maybe even Axie to a little extent, right? Yeah, I think the MMO and FPS games have been talked about extensively already, and probably Francis will be able to talk more, much better than I can about it. But I think for us, we're also looking quite deeply into the blue ocean space. So one specific genre, for example, we're quite excited about is the simulation genre. So you can think about games like Rise of Kingdoms and Call of Dragons. You know, these games, they make close to $1 billion a year, lifetime $1 billion a year revenue from mainly from Chinese companies, but they also have a kind of a global audience. And to me, the target audience for these games are actually a really, really strong fit for the blockchain space. It's heavily driven by whales. The core gameplay is a lot around resource allocation, how you send your armies, where you send them, and how you like form alliances with your guild. And then finally, as well, it's a lot of social status. People will spend tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, just to be on top of the leaderboard in these type of games. And you can't actually, you know, cash out. You can't actually sell your account unless you do it in the gray market, of course. So I feel like this is an example of a space which is quite underexplored, that we're kind of actively trying to find partners in that could build something quite meaningful here. You can think of EVE Online, for example, as probably a good Western counterpart for these type of games as well. I think the second one would be around like social wagering. So, you know, it's always fun to play. If you play poker, it's not fun to play poker without money. But the most fun you get from playing poker is when you win $1 off your friend, right? So I think that the whole social system that underpins poker, where you're, you know, not winning $1 off a stranger, but winning $1 off your friend, is what we feel that the blockchain could really reduce the friction for. And so I think that's also another area which we're exploring quite heavily, where we use blockchain to enable this, again, small scale kind of wagering where you play against your friends and the winner gets bragging rights.
Cool, thank you. I mean, you guys mentioned IP. You talked about looking at the pain points that users face along their journey. What do you guys think mass market gamers want from Web3 games, and do you think they like the current choice of games that are out there?
Probably saying no. I think, I mean, at least from the AAA perspective, it takes like 4 or 5 years to develop one of these things. Like, it isn't cheap either. You need a lot of capital. So like from that case, like from where Web3 gaming was created to now, like the tech doesn't exist really in a mass adoption sense to get games to build at that scale, and then B, like the tech's just not existed for long enough to have people like kind of launch with these types of products that would bring in like non-casual gamers, like a core competitive genre. I think from a mobile standpoint, you do have the capacity for this to be a pretty big thing. Like, you look at Indonesia, like you look at the markets where it's big in, like Web3, like Indonesia, for example, or the Philippines, like that whole area of Southeast Asia, everyone's a mobile gamer. Like, everyone does that. So like, I think it's just, I think to Jon's point earlier of the Play Store and the App Store on Apple, like it's just them being more nurturing of the user experience within the game and allowing it to be more of a gamified experience that they've had, so that companies can actually make money and profit off this. Because at the end of the day, that's the thing that you're aiming for. And if you can't do that, no one's going to make a game on it. So I think once those environments become better, like you'll see more of this. But that's kind of the stance we're at.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair analogy at the moment. I think, you know, there are games in market that if your motivation is to earn, give you that opportunity. It's just we're in a bear market, so if it's based on a token, probably not earning very much, and it's just not sustainable right now. You know, if you're talking about, you know, for us, like mass market, sort of Gen Z gamers, is there this like killer Web3 game or DApp at the moment? No. It needs to be built. And there's an argument that it may actually not look too dissimilar to the games that they already play. It's just a question of doing some experimentation about what their motivation is to get out of the game. And you know what, maybe part of the answer is just making games that are just like fun to play as they always have been, and there is no earning expectation at all. It's just, we're just compounding more fun things we can do with blockchain now to make the social element a lot more enjoyable. The interoperability thing I'm really excited about, but you also need to be realistic. Like, there are billion-dollar games companies that have zero interest in opening up their platform and allowing in like content and IP from other games, and sharing data from other games. So I think the companies I would be watching are a lot of these sort of like indie studios, just like in free to play. They're the ones that are really free to innovate in this space and break up the rule book, because they don't have a board, they don't have a share price, they don't have, might have investors, but that's where they're certainly the studios that I'm watching at the moment, because there's just nothing restraining them from innovating.
Yeah, so I think there are as Jon mentioned, there are kind of two paths. One is taking something that's works already in Web2, layering on the Web3 elements, and then helping players see the value of that, right? But there's also, I think, an alternative path where new technology unlocks new business models and new ways to innovate. And I think about it from the transition between kind of premium PC games to free-to-play mobile games, right? So thinking Candy Crush as a specific example, they made like, I think 20 billion lifetime revenue. They just announced it a week ago. And there was always Match 3, there was always this type of game on PC, but it was premium and it wasn't a good platform for this game, right? There was Bejeweled, for example. It was a niche. It was. I mean, people played it, but it was a very small niche. And so I think in the very same way, when there's kind of changes in technology between something that's already quite established, again, today that's mobile free-to-play, but tomorrow it would be like blockchain Web3, then what sort of new play patterns does that enable? Are there anything that's maybe a bit more niche or a bit different from the Web2 space that could potentially really flourish now that it's kind of built in the Web3 space? So yeah, I think again that there are two kind of paths forward, and it's really unclear whether which one of these would make more sense. But I think we're actively exploring both.
Great, thank you. Just one more question, and then we can go to the audience if you guys have any questions as well. So at the BGA, we actually do an annual report to look at a lot of these challenges that we see in the current year, and also what we can look out for in the year ahead. So I guess my next question is, what do you guys see for the coming year and for the future of Web3 gaming?
There'll be a lot of cool tech platform releases that come out. Like, we have our own internally that is helping facilitate, hopefully, millions of players. But I think that's going to be the piece that helps us progress from like being where we are now to actually having like a true state of mass adoption, where we have the tech that can facilitate the quantity of players we need. Because if you look at the current quantity of people using Web3, it's less than like what play CSGO daily. So we're not really in a good spot from like proving the tech works yet in terms of internally from our own industry standpoint, never mind like actually being able to push that out. So I think the big advent's going to come from like these new either layer ones currently progressing or layer twos that have spun up and seeing what they kind of have to offer.
I think you're out in December, right?
Yeah.
I think it's great. I think we're, as an industry now, I don't know how many billions has been poured into Web3 games, but I think it's exciting now. We're going to see the first, actual proper playable slices of games being released. So I think that's really exciting to get a bit of sort of life and confidence back into Web3 gaming. For our game genre, we hear there's a big announcement coming out from Google soon. So we're really interested to see how the App Store and Google policies evolve in this space, because I think that will be a tipping point for the sort of free-to-play market. And I just think the third area, which is, for all of us working in Web3, it's just the sort of unknowns that have happened this year, and just trying to ignore those and just plan your business based on obviously what you can do now, but you've also got to hedge your bets a little bit. For us, it's kind of like, okay, so if Google or Apple make an announcement that would accelerate things, making sure that we're prepared for that, and we can, designing our tech in a way that, okay, if they make this decision, it's very easy for us to move forward a lot quicker. So it's also trying to plan your sort of free-to-play mobile games for, sort of making your bets on what you think some of this infrastructure is going to enable you to do moving forward as well.
Yep, yeah. I think it's scalability and tooling. So, once a game gets into that kind of mainstream, large enough audiences, making sure that the blockchains themselves can support that speed, both in terms of number of transactions as well as finality. So that's, as a layer one, that's something that we are continuously working on. I think we hit 1 million TPS as a proof of concept recently. So again, we're making sure that we have the technical kind of framework to support all these successes when they come along. I think the next one is really around tooling. The goal is for us to make it as easy as possible for Web2 developers to build Web3 experiences without having dedicated blockchain engineers in your team. So we work with Unity for Unity SDK that basically, again, instead of abstracting the blockchain from players, we're abstracting it away from developers now. Of course, you want to do some super cool, some really deep concepts, you have to build it your own. But for newcomers, new people who are coming into play in this space, having this kind of easy onboarding for the developers is really important as well. So yeah, I think for us, it's scalability on the layer one side and then tooling to help more developers start in this space.
Great, thank you. I think we've got time for one or maybe two questions from the audience. I think there's a gentleman at the front who would like to ask a question with the cap on.
Yes, I'm curious about your sense of what VCs are looking for and at what stage of investment they're currently coming in.
Yeah, it really depends on your game, but I think my general observation is Web3 VCs are behaving like Web2 VCs now, which is good. Right, so they, outside of, if you've got some killer team, they are looking for a playable version of the game. They're looking for retention metrics. Monetization metrics may be difficult depending on how you monetize your game. Some VCs will look at your ability to build a community, perhaps as a proxy for your ability to circumnavigate some distribution problems. But I think, generally looking at friends raising now, VCs want a playable slice and are looking for some metrics. So very, very Web2.
Yeah, like we just closed this 20 million Series A. So we're very, very familiar with what they want to see. And like Jon hit it, unless you can de-risk it with the fact that you have a fantastic team or you have a relationship with a publisher, it is some kind of metric that they want to see. They want to see, not necessarily for us monetization numbers, but some level of retention, some level of hey, we have the capacity to get a user in and keep them. So unless you have a playable version of the game or a great fucking team, you're not going to get any money. Or you can slap some AI on that and they'll put $100 million in it. But that's a different story.
Yeah. I think, exactly. It's just the potential market of the game itself. I mean, it's always, but I think there's much more focus on the product itself now. So there are always the different stages, right? So there's, if you already have a soft launch game with metrics, that's obviously the most important and the only thing that matters. Then you have a qualitative prototype that you can kind of make qualitative judgments on. And then obviously at the concept stage today, it's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to find funding at that stage. I think beyond that, that's the main. The product is really what everyone's looking at today.
The other piece of advice is there's a lot of voyeurism around raising VC capital, right? I think depending on the stage of your game, there are amazing angel investors and non-dilutive grants that are available that might be a much better fit for your stage of game. Because personally, I'm really bullish on games at the moment because there's not enough people making specifically mobile games, right? Web2 or Web3, because everyone's using this excuse of, it's hard to do user acquisition. It's not, if you know what you're doing. So I think there is going to be, in a couple of years' time, a significant amount of M&A on both Web2 and Web3 of a certain type of game. and I know there's a lot of angels aggressively deploying cash into early stage games companies at the moment. So also have that think for your stage of game if you're VC ready, because you might not be. It's not to say you won't be, but you can waste a lot of time early on.
Yeah, and like to maximize your chance, like if you go later in the stage, like we are, try and keep your burn as low as possible. It's not always the best thing to do in terms of how much it'll cost to make the game, but like if you're actually just actively looking for VC funding, that is like one of the things that they look for. Like I wouldn't say all of them are clued up on how games get made. Sometimes the less you spend now, the more you spend later, which is definitely the case for us. Like if we save $20 million this year, it costs us $40 million next. So I think that's another piece to look at. It's like how much it's actually going to cost, and is that burn going to look good on the balance sheet for them, or is it going to look bad?
As a shameless plug, so Tezos, we do provide grants as well, so that's certainly a good option to explore.
Awesome, guys. We're going to have to wrap it up here, but thank you so much for your insights today. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thank you.